The appointments are lined up.
You waiting for somebody in there?
Got an appointment.
And it's not about what you want to hear, but what you need to hear.
It's not personal. It's strictly business. It's time you and me had a private talk, Winger. Step into my office.
It's Step Into My Office with Michael Lombardi. Mr. Lombardi, we'll see you now.
The 11:15 Pacific time appointment coming in to see Michael Lombardi today is Dan Campbell, head coach of the Detroit Lions, still the favorite for Coach of the Year in the NFL. After getting off to a red-hot 5-1 start, Michael, this team got brought down to earth real quick yesterday to the tune of a 38-6 blowout loss to the Baltimore Ravens. By the time the Lions converted their first offensive first down, they were already down 28-0. Dan Campbell's taken a seat at the desk, Michael. He asks you, how can we get back on track? How can we remain a contender in the NFC? What are you telling him?
First of all, Coach Campbell, I think what you got to realize is you walked into a storm and you got punched in the mouth and things move forward out of your control. It's one game. It happens in the NFL. You've played in the league, you know. But how you react to this is really going to determine your team. You can't let this loss beat you twice. So it happened. You coach about it. You talk about it. But as an executive, as someone who's overseeing the program, you've got to understand why it happened. And then you've got to make sure that you prepare yourself so it never happens again. And whether it's change your coverage, whether it's try to add a player, develop a player, because there's a little bit of a formula on how teams are going to want to attack you based on what Baltimore did. Because really, Baltimore didn't beat you with Lamar running. He had 9 carries for 36 yards in the game. They beat you with the passing game, and people are going to try to duplicate that passing game against you, protecting against Hutchinson and attacking your coverages. So to me, it's really, you got a cheat sheet. It's the greatest thing that could happen to you. Take that cheat sheet, prepare your team, work on your weaknesses, and know that you're a good team, and avoid these things and strengthen your weaknesses and move forward. But don't let the loss beat you twice.
If anybody will have the energy right in a locker room, I feel like it's Dan Campbell. So we'll see if they can get back on track this coming week. How about Josh McDaniels? We were just talking about everything that went wrong for the Raiders this past week. It has been an uphill battle this season. They end up losing to a rookie quarterback from D2 ball in his first start yesterday. Conversely, elect to go with Brian Hoyer over the rookie Aiden O'Connell. Without Jimmy Garoppolo available in this game, O'Connell still has to step in anyways, but they couldn't run the football. Lots of issues, Michael. It's hard to have this sit down with Josh. I know you're very close to this organization, but it still needs to be had. What are you saying to Josh McDaniels today?
Well, I think the greatest thing you have going for you, Josh, right now is the fact that you got to bye. You have a little bit of a time. You have some time off before your next game. And I think what you really need to do is sit down and say, okay, we got to have an honest conversation with ourselves. Like, why is the running game not working? Is it we're in too many two-back formations? Are we not doing what we need to do? But we've got to figure this out, because if we can't run the football, we're not going to be effective no matter Aiden O'Connell plays or Brian Hoyer plays or whoever plays. It's just not going to work. And you now have an extra day, and I think you've got to have a restart button. And you've got to kind of look at this team and say, okay, what do we need to do? You need to tackle way better. It's one of the worst. You're one of the worst tackling teams in all of football. Like, every 5-yard game becomes 12. Every 3-yard game becomes 7. Every negative play becomes 4. You just going to have to do a better. We're going to have to work on tackling. Go back to basics. But I think a lot of this has to come back to, how do you solve your offensive issues? You've got to do a better job on drive starters. You can't constantly run the ball on 1st and 10. And we've got to stop playing for 3 downs and control the football to protect our defense or protect our quarterback. We've got to throw the ball up the field. We've got to make chunk plays. We can protect the quarterback, but we're going to have to make some chunk plays doing it. And I think that's got to be the concern. And you've got to take this extra day, send the players home. It's not about more practice. It's about figuring out what we need to do to fix what we have. And you're going to have to be adaptive to change. When I was at the Raiders, I had a sign in my office: if you don't like change, you're going to like irrelevance even less. I think after 7 games, 3 and 4, not having a 100-yard game rushing, that if you're not going to change what you do in your approach, you're going to become irrelevant. And I would urge you to have the time to do it now.
Speaking of 3-4, that's what the Washington Commanders fell to this weekend after an ugly 14-7 loss to the Giants. How much longer does Ron Rivera have in Washington as he steps into your office today? Michael, their win percentage, 428 win percentage right now this season, is the same as the overall mark for Ron Rivera with the Washington Commanders in his tenure. As he walks into the office, are we thinking that his job is salvageable? What are you instructing him? What's the message to Rivera at this point in the season?
Well, look, Ron, I don't know. You've played in the league. You've been around football a long time. I don't know if you're watching the games or not, but your quarterback's getting killed. And I know you've subcontracted the offense out to Eric Bieniemy, who everybody thinks deserves a head coaching job. But you average 13 yards. You're 13th in the league in yards per attempt rushing. And yet you're 30th in the league in attempting rushing. You might want to think about walking in the offensive coordinator's room and saying, look, I know you want to throw it every down. I know you want to be like Andy Reid, but you don't have Patrick Mahomes, or do we have that line? You're going to have to protect the line. You're going to have to slow the game down because your defense isn't any good either. So at some point, since you're not coaching offense or you're not coaching defense, you're going to have to get complimentary in what you're doing. I mean, you've been very fortunate. You beat Atlanta. You had 193 yards of offense. Yesterday, you had 273, most of them coming on the last drive of the game. And the fact the kid hasn't turned the ball over but 3 times in the last 3 weeks after all these sacks is somewhat remarkable. So at some point, you're going to have to figure out how to manage the game around what you have as so poorly with your offensive line. You're going to have to do that quickly because Josh Harris is going to make a change. You got to know that because he didn't buy and spend $6.05 billion to inherit a mess, and right now it's a mess.
This next one, I'm personally very excited to see what you have to say. Caleb Williams steps into the office today, Michael, and I feel like sometimes when your tires are pumped so much, maybe it just gets to the point where the tire explodes. And for Caleb Williams, a minus 450 favorite to be the number 1 overall pick next year, he's a reigning Heisman Trophy winner. Their playoff hopes are now up in smoke after these last 2 losses, most recently to Utah this weekend. And in addition to the losses, Caleb Williams' maturity, character been questioned a little bit, made some outlandish comments recently, not shaking hands with the Utah players after the game. And you have analysts like Emmanuel Acho out there who are suggesting he should sit out the rest of the season to protect his draft stock. There is a lot going on in the mind of Caleb Williams right now. What does he need to hear to actually lead up to the draft and go where he wants to go?
Well, I would say this to him. Nobody wants to take a selfish player on their team. Nobody wants a problem. And your behavior is being evaluated with every step you take. Every time you step on the field, your behavior. You can listen to Acho all you want. He doesn't know anything about what's going on around the league. If you want to quit on your team, that's going to send a message to everybody. One thing you got to know more than anything is there's no player the most valuable. I don't know who's giving you advice, but it's probably not the best advice. And you're no lock to be the first pick overall in the draft. I think people have finally recognized that when you play against good level of competition, your numbers have gone way down. So you're going to need to listen to the truth at some point. You might think everything's wonderful, but as you know, the NFL isn't wonderful. And players have a hard time adapting to their teammates if they're not selfless and humble. And I think that's something you need to work on, and people are going to watch that. Nobody wants to take on a problem. And if you're the best player in college football, how come you can't beat Utah? How come it takes everything in your power to beat Arizona? How come you can't go into Notre Dame and win? Those are the questions you're going to get hit with. Nobody wants to take on your problems.
Humble's not a word I feel like a lot of people have used to describe Caleb Williams as of late. I feel like he's been more and more unlikable week to week.
Yep.
Last one here real quickly. Sean McDermott, obviously a lot of defensive injuries. What can you tell him to kind of right the ship for this group in Buffalo?
Sean, the first thing is you win. Your offense sets your defense up to play well. You got to get more out of pass rush. You got to get Floyd. You got to get Von Miller going. But the most important thing you got to do is figure out how to start the game fast and how to get the lead quickly. That's going to be critical. Playing from behind is not in your best interest defensively. You know that, and I know it. You're going to have to figure out that, and you're going to have to win with your offense to help your defense.
Go to VSiN.com/subscribe to become a VSiN Pro subscriber today.